Picture the Kraken, a mountain of muscle and tentacles emerging from the abyss to crush ships. It is the ultimate soft-bodied predator. But 300 million years ago, the Kraken was a prisoner. Deep in the Carboniferous oceans, the ancestors of our modern giants didn't have soft mantles. They lived inside massive spear-like fortress shells of calcium carbonate. Some were straight like needles, others were coiled like deadly springs. But if they were so well protected, why did they throw it all away? Why did the most successful predators on Earth decide to become naked and vulnerable? Today, we're going back to the age of the orthocones to discover the violent evolution that turned a slow-moving tank into the ocean's greatest nightmare. To understand why the Kraken, the ancestors of giant squids, eventually ditched their heavy armor while the Nautilus kept its fortress, we have to look at a 300-million-year-old evolutionary fork in the road. It wasn't just a choice of fashion, it was a high-stakes gamble between defense and agility. The Nautilus, the living fortress. The Nautilus is often called a living fossil because its design hasn't changed much in millions of years. It opted for the tank strategy. Protection. By staying inside a hard, coiled shell, it remained safe from many smaller predators. Energy efficiency. It uses gas-filled chambers within the shell to float effortlessly, requiring very little energy to stay suspended in the water column. The trade-off? The shell is heavy and creates massive drag. The Nautilus is slow, making it a scavenger rather than a pursuit predator. The ancestors of the giant squids, the jet fighters. The ancestors of the giant squids took the jet fighter strategy. Internalization. Over millions of years, their shells moved inside their bodies, becoming the pen, a thin, plastic-like internal structure. Maneuverability. Without the bulky external shell, they developed muscular mantles that could blast water out with incredible force, allowing for lightning-fast jet propulsion. The trade-off? They became soft targets. Without armor, they had to rely on speed, camouflage, and eventually high intelligence to survive. To understand why the ancestors of the Kraken abandoned their shells, we have to look at the terrifying neighbors they lived with. For millions of years, having a shell was like driving a tank. You were slow, but nothing could get through your armor. Then the bone crushers arrived. The arrival of jawed terror. During the Devonian period, fish underwent a radical transformation. The most famous was Dunkleistus, a prehistoric monster that reached lengths of 20 feet or 6 meters. Unlike modern fish, it didn't have teeth. It had massive, self-sharpening bony plates that acted like organic guillotines. These predators developed jaws with a biting force of over 8,000 pounds per square inch. For a shelled cephalopod, this was a disaster. The heavy armor that once kept them safe was now just a brittle container. To a Dunkleistus, a shelled ancestor of the Kraken wasn't a fortress, it was a crunchy snack. Evolution's ultimate choice, speed or death. As these jawed predators became faster and more powerful, the Kraken lineage faced an ultimatum. They couldn't out-armor a bone crusher, so they had to outmaneuver them. Feature. The old way, shelled. The new way, squid. Defense. External calcium shell. Camouflage and ink. Mobility. Slow, passive drifting. High-speed jet propulsion. Body type. Rigid and restricted. Flexible and hydrodynamic. By moving the shell inside the body, becoming the gladius or pen, these creatures shed weight and gained the ability to use their entire mantle as a powerful pump for jetting away from danger. When the ancestors of the Kraken began moving their shells inside their bodies, they didn't just gain speed, they entered a high-stakes game of see or be seen. In the ancient oceans, a shelled cephalopod could afford to be somewhat oblivious. If a predator approached, it just retracted into its fortress. But a naked squid has no such luxury. To survive without armor, these creatures had to develop the most sophisticated visual system in the invertebrate world. The evolution of the great Kraken eye. While fish were evolving bone-crushing jaws, squids were evolving camera-style eyes. Unlike the simple pinhole eyes of their cousin, the Nautilus, the Kraken's ancestors developed a true lens to focus on fast-moving threats from a distance. Massive size. The modern giant squid has eyes the size of dinner plates up to 27 centimeters wide to capture the tiniest bits of light in the dark deep sea. Sophisticated processing, large optic lobes in the brain to instantly analyze movement and calculate an escape route. Why sight replaced steel? Without a shell, situational awareness became the new primary defense. This sensory upgrade allowed them to spot shadows, detect the silhouette of a Dunkleistis swimming above them against the faint sunlight, navigate at speed. You can't use jet propulsion at 20 miles per hour if you can't see where you're going. Hunter versus hunted. They transitioned from passive scavengers to active pursuit predators, using their vision to track prey. Imagine being a target in a world of giants with nothing but your skin to protect you. For the Kraken, losing its shell was an evolutionary gamble that forced a radical upgrade. They couldn't stay behind a wall anymore, so they built a telescope. The great Kraken eye became their new shield. By developing eyes that could see in near total darkness and brains that could process images faster than their predators, the Kraken stopped being a victim of the bone crushers. They became the ones doing the watching. This wasn't just about seeing, it was about the birth of a new kind of intelligence, one born from the absolute necessity of staying one step ahead of death. Without a hard shell to retreat into, the ancestors of the Kraken had to find a way to become invisible. This led to one of the most incredible biological magic tricks in nature: chromatophores. By losing the rigid exterior, their skin became a flexible, living canvas. How the invisibility cloak works. Chromatophores are specialized organs in the skin that contain pigment sacs. Unlike a chameleon, which relies on slow chemical changes, a squid's color change is neuromuscular. This means it is controlled directly by the brain and happens in milliseconds. Elastic sacs. Each chromatophore is a tiny elastic sac filled with pigment: red, yellow, brown, or black. Muscle control. Tiny muscles surround these sacs. When the brain sends a signal, the muscles contract, stretching the sac wide to show the color. The result? By coordinating thousands of these tiny pixels, the creature can mimic the texture of sand, the shadows of rocks, or even the flickering light of the waves above. Beyond just color, iridophores and leucophores. To truly vanish, the Kraken's ancestors evolved layers of cells beneath the chromatophores. Iridophores act like biological mirrors, reflecting light to create iridescent blues, greens, and silvers. Leucophores reflect the ambient light of the environment, ensuring the animal matches the specific white or blue tint of the surrounding water. The living illusion. While the Nautilus was stuck in a beige and white fortress, the Kraken's ancestors were turning their own bodies into high-definition screens. Because they were no longer trapped inside a shell, their skin became a weapon of deception. Imagine a 20-foot predator that can stand in front of you and simply cease to exist. By pulsing their muscles, they could send waves of color across their bodies, mimicking the shifting patterns of the seafloor. This wasn't just camouflage, it was a psychological edge. In the ancient ocean, the greatest protection wasn't a wall of stone, it was the ability to convince your enemy that you weren't there at all.